Hey, folks, before we begin this episode, we just want to mention where we are as far as the Black Lives Matter protests. The truth is, some people have things that they need to be saying, and some of us need to be quiet and need to listen.
Yeah, and the two of us are in the latter category. I mean, I can point to myself here, Fatty. You know, I'm in Los Angeles. I was a reporter in this community for several years. I covered the 92 riots. I've covered race relations, racism in this community for a number of years. I thought I had a pretty good understanding of what was going on in this community, but clearly I don't. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is keep learning, right?
Yeah.
Keep listening, try to understand. So when I do have something to say, I know what to say. And I'll also say about our sport, real quick, cycling does need diversity too. And I think we both can agree that the race we both love, Leadville, and the races we do, and the sport in general, needs to also look at itself in these times and can. We can really seize this opportunity to say, hey, how can we be a little more inclusive? Listen to the voices out there and understand how they're feeling and how we can bring them in. So we are listening and we are learning in these times. And if you have a story to tell, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, teach us. We are listening and earnestly want to understand and be better. So don't plan on us in the future necessarily to be remaining quiet, but we don't want to talk out of turn and say something that we don't when we aren't truly educated and still have a lot to learn before we say something meaningful. That said, we are paying attention, and we definitely will have more to say when we can add something valuable to the conversation. When you think of all the races that have been put on hold this year, what comes to mind, in addition to the disrupted planning and training for races, but also the ripple effect it's had on all the people and companies who support races? One, of course, is our sponsor, Floyd's of Leadville.
Yeah, you can bet, had we been in Leadville this summer, Floyd's would have been there too, out in full force, welcoming racers and handing out samples. So you might be asking, what happens to all those samples? Well, you're listening to the right podcast to find out. And the answer is giveaway.
That's right, Hottie. Floyd is giving out sample packs of some of the products that they plan to hand out at races. Consider it sort of a virtual hand up and get your hands on some soft gels and gems and some of the single-serve drink mixes. The sampler packs are free, but the shipping is not. If you pay $50 worth of stuff, on the other hand, while you're on the site, then shipping is free.
Yeah, Floyd's of Leadville is hoping you can still find a way to get your fun in this summer. And to help with that, they want to put a little CBD in your jersey pockets. FloydsofLeadville.com is where you find the goodie giveaways, and use that code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount on the rest of your purchases. And of course, thanks to Floyd's of Leadville for sponsoring the show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Floyd's of Leadville. It is season 3, episode 12 of the show that breaks down, builds you up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I'm Michael Houghton, Hottie to most.
And I'm Eldon of FatCyclist.com, and you just call me Fatty. This episode is our first in actually a 3-part series that we are calling Owning It. At first, I was going to call it the Dumb Mistakes episodes, but considering the fantastic cooperation we got on these interviews, I do not want to label anyone or anything out there dumb. Instead, we're going to be having some of our very familiar and favorite Leadville racers willingly, of their own volition, coming out and telling us in their own words some of their biggest race mistakes. Indeed, they are owning it.
Yeah, very diplomatic of you. Owning it is a much better phrase. Yeah, these are the real facepalm moments, if you will. You know, the hand of the forehead, slap of the forehead moments in a racer's life that make you say, what was I thinking? We've all been there, including those of us who are not at the front of the race. And if you haven't been there, well, then trust us, you will be someday. It's just the way the cycling gods work.
Yeah, so 3 episodes of these own it moments. And we're going to be getting to these, not 3 in a row, but 3 over the course of the next several episodes. And you are, I promise you, going to be getting some laughs. You're also going to learn some stuff, and you're going to recognize yourself in some of these moments. And hopefully, maybe you'll learn enough that you will not make some of the same mistakes. Because if once you know that your heroes make some of the dumb mistakes we make, maybe that's the learning that you take with you.
Yeah, and we encourage you to listen to all 3 of these episodes. We're not going to do them in order. You'll probably hear them spaced out a little bit because Fatty and I are still working on collecting all this terrific data. But we want you to listen to all 3 of them because at the end, we do want to get your feedback on what you thought the best story was. Like the best, maybe the funniest story or the one you got the most out of as far as preventing your own mistake. And of course, Fatty and I will chime in as well. We want to hear what you think of all these terrific, and we do mean that in all honesty, terrific mistakes by these folks. Mm-hmm. We're gonna start off with a bang here, Fatty, and that's with Dave WIENS, because he, along with Rebecca Rush, are the true pro icons of the Leadville 100.
Oh, they really are. And while we're starting with Dave, I want to be clear: Rebecca will have her turn in this little mini-series.
But for right now, the winningest man in Leadville history, and 3 mistakes many of us will recognize. One that almost gave him a DNS, another that almost gave him a DNF, and one that cost him a world championship.
Dave WIENS, great to have you here. Tell us about some dumb things you've done on a bike.
Immediately, 2 pretty dumb things come to mind from Leadville. The first one was a pre-race mistake, and it was 2007, the race, the year against Floyd. And early morning, where we were staying, there was kind of a big giant carport. It was a condo unit, and I went out there in the morning, took my race bike, put it up on top of the Suburban as we had to drive into town. And my wife Susan goes, "Honey, look." And it was a big vaulted log structure. And she pointed toward the back. And I would have just shaved the bike right off the top of the Suburban as soon as I backed out. And that was the morning of the race. So I was like, okay, wow, this is going to be a good day. So that was a good one. Thank you, Susan, for saving my race.
But you did not hit it, right?
No, I hadn't gotten in yet. I was still putting it up there, or maybe I had just gotten down and it was all secure. And she comes out and she goes, "You might want to take a closer look at that." So that was.
I've actually had 4 bikes on a roof rack when I drove into my garage once. I actually damaged 4 bikes and my garage door and my car all in one terrible second. So I know that feeling, but never right before Leadville. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was comical. And where I was, I'm looking at these huge ceilings and this, I'm not even paying attention to the details. But yeah, that one could have been bad.
Just I do want to ask, I'm sure you've thought about it, but what would you have done? Did you have a spare? Did you have something that you could have ridden anyway? I'd have to. If you just busted the frame? I have thought about that, and when I think about it, I quit thinking about it because I don't really think there was a good option. We put so much into our race bike, and yeah, there's spare wheels, but rarely is there a spare frame. And at that time, there wasn't. I mean, there might have been another bike in there, but it wouldn't have been that hardtail that was set up ultra light that was really important to that day. So no, it would have been a disaster. Well, thank goodness that your wife was paying attention. I mean, yeah, kudos to her for sure. Yes. Then the other one, and this one just makes me chuckle, but the race year was 2010. My last year in the race, that was the year that Levi was there, and he won the race. And in my preparation, ever since that 2007 race, I really put a lot into my bike. I want to have the lightest possible bike. And that year, 2010, I came across an ad for some carbon fiber discs for disc brakes, and they're really light. And so I get in contact with this company, and they send me a set of these discs. This is literally just a few days before the race.
with a kind of a detailed break-in process. And I went up on a training ride. The race is Saturday. This was on Wednesday. And, I broke these discs in as I was supposed to. And I get in the race, and you can see this. It's in the film. We're going down the power line, and all of a sudden, Dave, for whatever reason, in a steep section, jumps off his bike and starts running. Well, my brakes weren't working. They simply didn't work, and they worked, until it got really steep, and then they would just fade away. And so I had recognized this not until the upper part of the power line. And so as I'm getting down to the bottom where it gets really steep, I'm just going okay. And then when I feel like I'm pulling as hard as I can and I'm continuing to accelerate, I have to pick that moment to jump off. And today I couldn't do it. I'm too old and feeble. I would just crash into the ground. But at that point, I still had a little bit of athleticism left, and I jumped off the bike and ran until I got to a certain point, and I got back on them. And then, if you think about it, the only other really fairly steep place was up on Columbine coming down, and I didn't have to jump off, but I had to carefully nurse the brakes, and I was super nervous. So bad decision. I don't believe that brand or those brakes still exist. I certainly don't see a lot of carbon fiber discs on the market today, and maybe there's a good reason for that. But I guess it didn't really hurt my race because that was my fastest Leadville ever. I think I was knocking on the door of 6.5 hours. But again,
to go faster, just don't have brakes.
Right. Oh, yeah. So that one, those are the two that really stick out to me at Leadville.
That is a great pair of stories. It is good to know that the temptation to buy stupid light parts in the hopes that they are going to somehow make a difference is not restricted just to a citizen weight weenies. That Dave WIENS has a little bit of the weight weenie in him as well, willing to try something out. Fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spot and say, okay, so that's a couple of Leadville ones. Before we started recording, you mentioned that you had others that were not Leadville. I would love to have one more story from you. Something outside of Leadville. Big mistake.
Well, certainly one of the biggest mistakes that had an impact on a race result was in 1991 at the World Cup Finals in Berlin. I happened to be leading the series after, I think it was, we had raced 8 or 9 times. After the second to last race, they dropped 3 or 4 of your events. You counted your top 5, and at that point, I rose up to the top of the standings. And so I'm wearing the leader's jersey. All I have to do is have a pretty solid result. I had a decent points lead to win the World Cup overall. And I know we were racing in this park in Berlin, right next to the wall. It was right after the wall came down. East Germany the east side of Berlin was just a stone's throw away. I believe this park was rubble from World War II that they just piled up and eventually planted grass on. And it wasn't a great mountain bike course. It was just grass. And, we were like, what the heck? And so we're there on the starting grid, and the guys are cutting up. They're talking to each other. No one's really paying attention. And I glance over at the starter, and I see him raise the gun. And I'm like, this thing's going to start, and no one's even ready for it. But I'm going to be ready for it. And sure enough, he just fires the pistol, and I bolt off the front. I'm sure I had the whole shot, and it was 100 meters straight, and then a 180-degree turn coming back the other way. And that was when clipless pedals, SPDs, were relatively new. I'd been riding them for a little over a year at that point. And for whatever reason, I couldn't get, 1 foot in the pedal. And so instead of just just wasn't that experience with them or even as a bike racer at that point, really, I should have just kept mashing and stayed out in front and not worried about it. But instead, I think I slowed down and I looked down to, that's going to help. And the rider to my right had caught up with me, and he just, was turning to make the turn. And I ended up, going down at the start of this race. Oh. And there was a video of the start later on, and I couldn't see it happening. I saw myself get a good start. And then when I went frame by frame, all of a sudden in one frame, there's a Diamondback, the panel on our shorts sticking way up in the air. Like my leg was up, this high in the air. I'm like, yeah, that was me. So, long story short, I'm last now. And had I had good form that day, I should have been able to ride up into. I needed to get ninth place, and I ended up getting up to 11th for the day. And the guy, some of the Europeans on the Diamondback team, Claudio Vandelli, these guys were trying to help me. Get on the wheel, and it didn't have the great day, and I was so far behind that then it was hard to pass, and it was super dusty, and but it was I'm convinced that had I just been able to not crash in the start and looking down at my pedal, I could have had the result that would have made me the World Cup champion in 1991. But John Tomac, he won the day and he won the overall series, and he's one of the greatest mountain bike racers of all time. Nothing but respect for that guy. So he ends up being in the record books as the World Cup champion from 1991. But it was, what I always have said: you learn way more and you build way more character from not winning and not having success. Whether it's Leadville or the World Cup or any of the smaller interactions that we all have day to day. We learn a lot more when we're not successful than maybe those times when we do actually knock it out of the park.
Absolutely. Dave WIENS, great stories, truly dumb mistakes. It is such a pleasure to hear them from you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Eldon. I appreciate it.
Hadi, I loved this conversation with Dave because I have had a variation of all three of those mistakes. I've crashed because I've looked down at a bad moment. I've regretted making stupid light component purchases. And as I've mentioned, I have damaged a lot of bikes in one bad moment because I forgot that all of them were mounted on my car roof. So it is great to know that Dave WIENS and I have at least all of those things in common.
Hey, just imagine the buzz at the starting line in 2007 if WIENS had not shown up at the starting line to race with Floyd or against Floyd, or if he'd crashed on the power line descent in 2010 right in front of Leipheimer. And I want to say regarding that 2010 explanation, I mean, I'm glad he did tell that story because I always had this huge kind of hole in my mind. Like, what happened to Dave on that power line descent? Why was he running down the thing? Only that his brakes had gone out, right? Yeah.
Oh, it's so fantastic. And just a little spoiler alert, we're going to be having a conversation in a future episode with the guy who made that movie. So lots more coming here, but so many great dramatic moments in that Race Across the Sky movie. And this definitely would have been one of them. WIENS not finishing the race. So, Hadi, you recently had a pretty dramatic crash of your own. Have you figured out what was behind that?
Yeah, I recently went through a bunch of testing, Fatty, to get to the bottom of it, trying to find out why I would have these sudden episodes of being really lightheaded. Twice of these episodes happened during exercise. Very strange. Well, the doctors didn't find anything obviously wrong, and they said I'm okay to keep my activity up, but they did advise that I keep up with my hydration at all costs. Becoming lightheaded or even passing out is often caused by a sudden loss in blood pressure. And one way to keep blood going to the brain is to make sure you have good blood volume. And one way to achieve that is keeping up with hydration. All this has me thinking, I want to get my hands on a new product being carried by the feed, and that's Nuun's pre-workout Prime Drink Mix.
Yeah, our friend Brandon at the feed is super excited about this mix. The idea of Nuun's Prime is to get the athlete off on the right foot when it comes to hydration. The mix has electrolytes, branched-chain amino acids for hydration, along with a probiotic to protect the gut from the stresses of training and racing. There are a couple of flavors, orange and fresh berry. Orange has caffeine, fresh berry does not. Caffeine, of course, is a great way to jumpstart a workout or race, but if you're training in the afternoon or toward the evening, maybe go without the caffeine. Your call.
I have loved Nuun products for a long time, and I'm excited to try the Prime products, which, by the way, are part of Nuun's Podium series of products designed for the endurance athlete. I've tried other pre-workout drinks before and found them very tough to get down. By the sounds of it, Nuun has worked hard on taste and texture, and testers at the feed tell us they have nailed it.
Yeah, you can get the Nuun products and, of course, everything else at the feed at a 15% discount by signing up at thefeed.com/Eldon. Leadville. And that's actually super relevant to our next Own It moment, Hottie. It's a cautionary tale about staying on top of your nutrition when racing the Leadville 100. You know Alex Grant. He is the owner of Gear Rush, which is a terrific online bike consignment company. I got to say, anytime I personally sell a bike, I always go with Gear Rush.
But in addition to his day job as an entrepreneur, Alex has podiumed at Leadville and has won the Park City point-to-point race more times than you could count. But that doesn't make him immune to dumb mistakes.
Alex Grant, great to have you on the show. Tell us about something dumb you've done on a bike.
Well, hi, Eldon. First, thanks for having me on the show. Boy, and something dumb I've done on the bike. Yeah, we could probably have a couple-hour episode about that. I've done a lot of dumb things. But when I think back on dumb mistakes that I've made over the years, to me it usually comes down to sort of just getting too caught up in the race on race day and blowing it on my nutrition plan, because so much of endurance racing is having that nutrition plan and sticking to it. And it's so easy on race day to get too caught up in the excitement of the race and what's going on in the race and just absolutely forget about that plan, and the whole thing goes out the window. And next thing you know, you're in some horrible bonked state, or you're cramping, or you just run low on energy. And I mean, we've even seen that with Grand Tour guys.
Yep.
I mean, there's days when Froome had a hunger knock or Lance had a bonk, and they just forgot to eat. Well, like, how do you forget to eat? Well, turns out it's pretty easy, actually. So
give me an example. When does that happen to you?
One specific time that comes to mind is Leadville 2012. Mm-hmm. I'd had a great year in 2011. I'd finished third that year. I think it was my best finish to that date. I was riding with Todd Wells until most of the way up Columbine. I think Todd won in 2011. Albin Licata was second, and I was third. And so then, coming into 2012, I had big expectations. I was hoping for big things.
Right.
And I felt like I prepared well. And then, once the race kicked off, it was a really stacked field that year. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of guys that were really strong. I think Jeremy Horgan Kobelski was there.
Levi Leipheimer.
I think we had Levi in there, and it was just chaos. It was really fast at the front. I think those guys had a bit of a crash, and it was just, there was so much going on, and I just completely forgot to eat and drink anything in that first couple hours. I was so focused on the race, and anytime there would have been a chance, I don't know what I was doing, but I wasn't putting things in my mouth.
No time to eat.
No time to eat. I was looking around. Maybe I was riding, or I was chasing back to the group, or I was riding on the front because maybe I felt good. And it's like, no, when you feel good, you don't go to the front and ride. You should, in a race like that, you need to be, sticking to that plan. But I mean, it's so easy to just forget and get caught up in things. And so, here we are. I get out and we go up Columbine, and I'm probably starting to feel it a bit, and then coming back,
I'm feeling great. Why am I hungry?
Yeah, what's going on? Or, that's the thing, is I wasn't even hungry. I was feeling fine. And so that's when you forget. It's those days when you're feeling pretty good that you're like, yeah, I'm good. I'll be fine.
I'll eat later
today. Yeah. Like it's a different thing. Like my body just doesn't need it today. No. So anyway, coming back up power line. I don't think I've ever bonked like that prior. I mean, I was dizzy. I was hallucinating. I was steering off the trail. I was
seriously
all over the place. Yeah. Oh yeah. I was a mess. Like,
what were you seeing?
Oh, well, I don't know if I was, I wasn't seeing visions, but I was certainly
But you weren't seeing the trail.
blurred colors and trees and like flashes of light, you know what I mean? Like that, you get to that point. And so there might've been some sort of, it was a hot year too. Maybe I was dehydrated, maybe minor heat stroke or not heat stroke because it's not that hot up there, but let's just put it this way. I was in tough shape.
You were dehydrated and bonked out of your mind.
I was done. Yeah. So I actually had to pull over, get off the bike, put some food in and just sort of regroup. And it's like one of those things when that happens, it's like, well, you do all this preparation. You can train all year round, but if you throw it away on race day by not following your nutrition plan, then it's that right there will just ruin your day.
All the planning in the world doesn't count if you don't use it on race
Didn't
day.
matter. And I know everyone's done it. And just know that, I think everyone, including pros, have done it. And, all we can do is learn from it. I do think it's that these days there's a lot more research out there as far as what we're supposed to be doing in endurance nutrition. So I encourage people to kind of look at that and make a plan, write it down, stick to it, follow it, whatever you got to do. If you need to set a timer, if you need to go through the night before and mark spots on the course where you're going to eat, you're going to drink. Oh, here I'm going to have this, here I'm going to have that. And don't forget, because there's times where, and the other thing is I feel like the more out of it you get, the harder it is to even get food out of your pocket. Like you're bonked out. And that's what I experienced on Powerline that day. I couldn't even get my hand in my pocket to grab my food because
coordination's out the window with everything else. Yeah.
Coordination was gone. I was going to fallen over. I was like, couldn't, then never mind getting it unwrapped or what. It's like, it was not happening. So, make it as easy as possible for yourself because, a race like Leadville is, it is of course, a bike race. It's a fitness event, but it's also a nutrition contest, which I know you've said before. It's an eating and drinking contest disguised as a bike race because it's so much of the second half of that race in particular is proper fueling. And if you don't do it, you're done. So,
Alex, that is a great story and great lesson. And I've been there. It's nice to know that even the fastest guys have been there and have had their best laid plans completely demolished by that. Thanks so much for telling us that story.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. If I can help someone not do the same thing, then job done.
Hadi, I got to say, I love how Alex owns his dumb mistake. I think 75% of us have done the exact same thing at Leadville. Although, to be honest, to be frank, at a much lower speed.
Yeah, Alex's story goes to show anyone can get too amped up in the heat of the race and abandon the plan they've made and promise themselves they're going to stick to it no matter what.
Yeah, and he paid the price too. You can be a world-class racer and still have a world-class bonk.
There's no way around it. If you don't stay on top of your food and hydration in the Leadville 100, you are not going to have a good day. It's the most certain thing in the world.
Yeah, and that rule really extends out beyond hydration too, Hadi. You've got to practice eating on your bike so your nutrition is second nature, and you've got to have your equipment dialed and working right for you so your bike is reliable and rides like second nature. As you know, I'm constantly talking about my 2021 Leadville single speed for that reason right now. But, that bike, it's a topic for a whole different episode. I mean, literally, I'm going to talk about it for a whole episode.
Yeah, as far as new bikes go here in the Hadi household, in the Hadi family garage, well, that new bike belongs to Mrs. Hadi. In fact, you might say she has the nicest bike in my garage. Hers came complete. A giant Revolt gravel bike, carbon frame, Ultegra disc, carbon wheels. But the wheels didn't stay on very long. I put something from my inventory onto her bike because the stock wheels were just, okay.
Yeah, they're all right. There's no reason to put up with okay now since Envy has this really great new bike upgrade program. It is a brilliant idea I think our listeners are going to want to know about. Basically, it applies to the age-old story. You buy a great new bike, but wish it had Envy wheels, of course. So now you can go ahead and get the wheels you want and get credit for the wheels it came with. So Envy they'll take the stock wheels that came with your bike, they'll take those wheels off your hand, and they're going to give you credit toward the set of Envies your bike deserves.
Here's the breakdown. If your bike came with carbon wheels, Envy is offering an $800 credit towards a set of M Series, G Series, or SE Series wheels. A stock alloy set will get you a $500 credit. If you're interested in the new Foundation Series, Envy has a deal for those too, $325 for your trade-in.
Yeah, you can make your bike better, faster, more reliable, and about 1,000% sexier with a set of Envy wheels. Check out Envy's new bike upgrade deals and the rest of their components at Envy, that is ENVE.com. Speaking of Envy, you know who makes the Envy cycling jersey and bibs?
I believe that is another one of our sponsors, DNA.
Yeah, and you know who makes the kits for Adobe, which is where I work for my day job?
Well, I'm not going to stray too far from our sponsor, DNA.
No, of course you're not. And of course, DNA makes the kits for fatcyclist.com back when my old blog was active, and they make the kits for this podcast. And there is a good reason why. They make great kits. They design them beautifully. They make them at a great price too.
Yeah, and DNA will do for you what they've done for us and countless other teams and companies. DNA can design a custom Italian-sewn kit to show off your club, family, or whatever it is you are promoting.
Yeah, and they won't just design it. They were going to work with you to get a look you love, and then they're going to get that jersey made. They're going to set you up with an online store, and they're going to take care of fulfillment, soup to nuts. They do it all. They do it fast. They do it great. And DNA is offering a 10% discount to our listeners. All you got to do is go to dnacycling.com, and in the custom apparel inquiry page, you choose other. And in the where did you hear about us drop down, just type Leadville podcast.
All right, back to the theme of the show, that is owning it. And let's turn things to you, Fatty. What is the dumbest mistake you have ever made at the Leadville Trail 100?
I'm going to put that answer on hold because that would take a while. I've made a lot of dumb mistakes. I need to sort through them. So let's just say I'm going to do that in the third episode of this series. How about you?
I'm going to defer as well. In the next episode of this series, you'll probably hear me ramble on about some embarrassing, some regretful moments. But we do have time for some of the answers to this question when we originally posed it as a question of the week on Facebook. So many people had so many great answers to the question, in fact, that we thought, what if we asked some pros that question?
Yep. And I think it is still worth reading some of the answers folks in the Facebook forum had for us. We're going to get to a few of them in each of the episodes in this three-parter. I'm going to start with the first one that is kind of maps to Alex's interview that we just listened to, and that was Dave McGaffin, who said, "Not practicing my nutrition for the race." You got to execute on your plan, but of course you got to have a plan. And if you don't practice with your nutrition, I think, I don't know, you and I sound like a broken record on this one, Hadi, but if you don't practice it, you're not going to execute it on race day.
Yeah, you almost want to envision. I mean, it's one of those things, you want to use a visualization technique too, I think works as well. Like, see yourself eating on the course. I mean, you really want to go, okay, I'm going to be on the pipeline section. And as soon as I get through the banner there, going outbound, I'm going to reach in my pocket and grab said bar, gel, whatever it is you want to go for, and just kind of see this all happening before you even get to the start line at Leadville or wherever it is you're going to race. That'll just make execution a little more automatic. Not totally, but a little more automatic.
Yeah.
Bonnie also responded to our inquiry, and she said, believing not being faster was important enough to feel disappointed in myself. In other words, like dwelling on a finish that didn't quite meet what you'd set out. Yeah, I think, in the athletic world, Fatty, you'll hear athletes say this all the time. Do they believe it? I think they do. I think this is how the best athletes move forward. I think this is why some athletes rise to the top, and that they have this ability to put things behind them. They have short-term memory. You got to believe that Michael Jordan, if he went out and had tanked a game, which didn't happen that often, but had he would have put it in the rear. He would have thought about it quickly, like, where were my mistakes? Where did I mess up? And then he would immediately go into forward-looking mode, like, okay, I remembered it. I'm banking it. I remember the mistakes I make. Let's start thinking about the next thing and try to put the negativity, behind him.
Yeah, that's so important. A personal example here of exactly what Bonnie is talking about, who is, by the way, I will say, a fantastic admin in the Leadville 100 participants Facebook forum. My third Leadville, my first Leadville, I did it in around 10 and a half hours. My second one, I did it with some friends, finished in about 11 and a half hours. My third one, I had this dream of finishing sub 9. I had a really great day and finished in 9 hours and 13 minutes, or right around there, which is, almost an hour and a half faster than I had ever done it before. But did I celebrate? No, because I had not hit that, that arbitrary number of 8 hours and 59 minutes. I actually was like devastated. And instead of celebrating the fact that I had improved my time by 1 hour and 20 minutes, I didn't enjoy the evening afterward. I was miserable about it and just destroying myself over the fact that somehow I hadn't found that 13 minutes. So sure, find that 13 minutes, but also celebrate the fact that you did an amazing job in whatever race you're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and do the next one here, Hadi. And that is Rohit Berry, good friend of mine. He says, not checking my equipment the night before. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that one because I think that may be very relevant to what I will eventually use as my own personal biggest mistake ever. So I'll talk about that later, but yeah, go over your equipment. But I think you've also got a story about why it's not a great idea to check it obsessively and endlessly.
Yeah, there's a difference between checking and then trying to change. Check or change.
Rebuild your bike.
Yeah, those are two different things. I think Rohit got a good point here. You do want to check your bike. I mean, one last, just before you go to bed, go grab the brakes, make sure the brakes are working, spin the cranks backward, bounce the bike, something. Just make sure things are in place. But don't start changing things. I mean, your bike setup should have been decided weeks before the race. I've seen a good friend of mine decide he was going to make adjustments to his brakes the night before a race, and he got up the next morning and had no front brake on his race bike. Luckily, he had a backup bike, and he ended up racing that thing. But I mean, this is where the difference between checking and changing. Check, yes. Change, no, the night before the race.
No.
All right. How about Max Ackerman? Max Ackerman, sorry. I added an R to his last name. I think it's Max Aikman. Trying some new products on race day. Oh boy.
Oh my boy.
Man, that's a red flag in any race Bible, I think. Do not try new products, especially food, especially nutrition. But, I think I see where this comes from, though, Fatty. I kind of get it. Man, not so much on the food. I think even the pros will tell you, no, food, hydration, do not try new things. But pros will go ahead and try maybe a different tire set on race day. They will. Now, they're sponsored. And, and they probably have the luxury of help out on the race course should things not work out for them correctly. And we did hear from our Dave WIENS there saying how he tried something on race day and it didn't work out so great. But I get where some of the thinking might come up, like, oh, I'll just run this on race day. Or maybe the product just showed up to you the day before the race and you want to go ahead and put it on. Generally not a great idea, but I get where some of that influence might come from.
Yep, I've made the same mistake, and it is, in all capitals, a mistake. So the next one is from Kevin Summers, going out too hot and not racing my race. That is actually one of the things that Rebecca Rush is very clear about. She always talks about going out slow so that you can finish fast. So many people go out so hot and have cooked themselves by the time they get to the turnaround point. And you do that and you get so excited by the moment that you've been waiting for that you completely burn yourself out while you've still got a significant amount to go. So yeah, you got to hold yourself back a little bit so that you can have something in the tank for the finish line.
Yeah, I know Kevin. He's a terrific rider, really strong rider. I get it why, as a stronger rider, say you're in gold or silver or even red for that matter, and maybe you want to jump up there and grab a wheel and see if you can get towed along. And it might cost you a few more calories, a few more watts than you otherwise would have. That's a calculation that some racers, I do believe, have to make, especially the stronger riders who are trying to do something really special. So you may feel like you need to. Now, ultimately, you have to know how to regulate that and have to know when to say, okay, that's enough. I need to back off now. I got my ride. I got my free ride to Upkevens or to Carter or to the base of Sugarloaf, and there you shut it down and go ahead and ride your race from there. So that's, I think for most people though, for most of us in this race, it is a pacing strategy. It is a pacing deal, and you ride your race. And even the great Jonathan Lee, who we had on this show, talked about that, how important pacing was for him. And he's a really strong guy, and he went out and rode his race and rode a terrific time. So yeah. Kevin, we feel you. We know what you're saying there. Yeah, too hot It can be easily dragged into that thing, and suddenly you've got your chin in your stem, and you're thinking, oh, God, here we go. And you're at the base of Keevens thinking, what have I done to myself? How about, should we keep up with this, Fatty? We got time for a few more here?
Yeah, I want to do two more. I see the finish line for this one, but Robert Lasker has one that I think is so important. We take this race very seriously. I mean, you and I, we've done 3 seasons of a podcast about a one-day race, but it is taking this race too seriously and forgetting why I started endurance racing in the first place. I think there is so much wisdom in that. Don't ever forget that this is a special and fun and exciting day out on the race, and don't take it so seriously that you forget to enjoy it.
I get it too. The buildup is, look, you work at this races like the Leadville 100, or maybe you're in DK 200 or any of these big endurance races, and you put a lot of effort into it, and here comes race day, and you start getting a little nervous, you get a little twitchy, you get a little worked up. Here's a little trick you can try to play with your head. It's worked for me. I used it on somebody else. It seemed to work for them. When you think of that Leadville start line or any big start line, where are you? You're in a big group ride, and you kind of want to think of it that way. You go, I'm headed out for a big group ride, just like any other big group ride you'd have been on. You try to just tone it down that way. Again, I'm going to use the pro athlete. You know, they try to put their head into that space as well. When Super Bowls come along, World Series, playoffs, what have you, they try to take all that noise and tone it down as much as they can. No, do they get rid of all of it? No, there's always tension and pressure, but they try to say, hey, we're just going to treat this like any other game, any other day, any other practice, any other whatever. And that's the way they kind of try to calm those nerves. I'll never forget, Fatty, sitting at the breakfast table one morning before Leadville, and a good friend of mine, he was there for his first year at Leadville, and I could see his foot just tapping away. He was just tapping and tapping and tapping. He couldn't get his oatmeal down. I looked at him. I said, dude, you're going out for a big group ride. Just remember that. You're going, and he did. He went out and had a great day, gold buckled. We came across the line together, so you got to play a little head game with yourself to kind of calm the nerves. All right. Let's wrap up with a familiar name. How about that? How about Cole Klober? Cole has
son of Ken Klober.
Son of Ken Klober. He said, one time I tried a BMX grind chain on my normal width front ring of my single speed. Oh boy. I also had just put on a new chain ring the night before the race. Man, he's piling up the mistakes here. I didn't tighten the bolts down so well. Then, near Twin Lakes Dam, my chain ring bolts backed out, and I folded my front ring like a taco on Tuesday, and it snapped. He DNF'd. Oh, he says, rest in peace, race year 2006. Wow.
Cole, I mean, he is, if you watch his Instagram feed, his Facebook stuff, he is a skateboarder and a BMXer in addition to a very talented technical rider, and you can kind of see why he wanted to play around. He can do stuff like that, but man, I don't even have any analysis on this. I'm just like, oh, Cole, that is so fantastic and so wrong. And yep, you try something crazy and new, and it is going to come and bite you in the butt. Other than Cole's, I think there is a lot of wisdom from all these Leadville veterans, Hadi. I can tell just, looking at these, and we've got a bunch more in the other 2 episodes of the owning it moments that I think is going to make this just a must listen trio of episodes. Shimano's really been on a roll upgrading their existing lines lately. We've talked about the hot new XTR crankset and Dior upgrading up to 12 speed. The Olivio and Turney lines have also been updated.
Yeah, but one thing that caught my eye recently, Fatty, was Shimano's attention to a niche portion of the cross-country mountain bike world. Now, flat mount brakes are a regular thing on road and gravel bikes, but who knew they can also be found on some mountain bikes? Well, Shimano knows, and that's why they are now offering an XTR, XT, and SLX caliper in flat mount.
Yeah, there are a few bike brands out there like BH, Canyon, and Cannondale, just to name a few, who have cross-country frames that take flat mount calipers. Shimano's flat mount, their mountain bike calipers clear up a huge hurdle for owners of that kind of frame. And look, who wants to run a road brake caliper on a mountain frame anyway?
Shimano's flat mount mountain bike calipers are dual piston. They take resin or metallic pads. The XTRs will do up to a 160 rotor, and the XT and SLX up to 180. So they've got all the XC stopping covered. Check out all of Shimano's stopping power at bike.shimano.com. And since brakes have been a big part of the show, especially Dave WIENS' story, that topic, brakes, will get us to our next guest. You know him from last season, our resident wrench, the man who guides us through our mountain bike maintenance, Ryan Morse of Diablo Wheelworks. In his season 3 debut, Ryan talks brakes with us and one of the few annoying things that can arise with disc brakes. We're back with Ryan Morse of Diablo Wheelworks. Hello. And a popular topic, probably one that causes more frustration with mechanics, I'm guessing, these days than any other, and that is brake rub and brake noise.
Brake squeal.
Oh, yeah. They come in
Michael,
and,
your bikes are the best.
My rotor's squealing. My brakes are making. I can just see the frustration level now.
Yes.
I've actually gotten pretty good at this myself, dealing with it. I can do a few things in my own little shop at home.
You were also one of the more accepting of the issue as well, and you tend to make the squealing go away better than I can on your bike.
Yeah. Well, what Ryan means is I'm willing to put up with more noise than most people out there. It squeals a little bit. It doesn't bother me a little bit. Let's start first with that good old rotor rub.
Sure.
And this is the noise, folks, and I'm going to try to replicate it. If you spin your wheel and you hear it going ching, shing, shing, is that about right, Ryan?
Tick, 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 ching, ching, ching. Yeah.
All those noises, probably a rotor that's out of true. Am I right there?
Could be rotor out of true, could be a caliper that's possibly not centered, could be your frame mounts where the caliper mounts are not square. There's a lot of reasons that can cause rotor rub. Sometimes the age of the brake can affect things. When your pistons don't retract enough, you may have sticky piston seals. You may have a master cylinder that is not allowing fluid to move through at the brake lever enough to allow pistons to retract. There's a lot of reasons, but I would say typically the first thing you look at is the rotor and to see how true it is.
And that's probably the one that the home mechanic can tackle the easiest. They can put their bike up in the stand. They can even just pick it up a little bit and spin the wheel and look between the pads and the rotor and see if it's wobbling. And if it is, you can safely tweak it with
to
even
a certain extent.
Right?
Yeah.
How would you suggest people try and do that?
In a perfect world, having a proper tool to do it, there are rotor truing tools by the major brands. Everybody sort of has one. That's what I use. If you're careful and have a very clean crescent wrench, you can definitely use that as well. Some people will even, take a nice piece of steel or aluminum and cut a little slit into it and make their own tool. Yeah. There's a lot of ways that you can do it. I use a park tool to do it, and that's what I like to use.
That's what I use too, to straighten out my rotors, and I've gotten pretty decent at it. Although you can go too far, and you can end up bending these things beyond belief.
And a wobble is especially something that has sort of a side-to-side wobble in its own sort of area. You get 2 inches of a rotor that goes left and right. It's not always easy to get that out. You're just happy if you can get a little bit of clearance. Mm-hmm.
Servicing pistons is another job I personally tackle. I know for the home mechanic or for somebody not inclined, maybe a little rougher, but just briefly describe what happens when we service pistons and why this is important to rotor rub.
Well, there's definitely levels of what you can do to service a piston, from the basic sense of cleaning your calipers and pistons periodically to get rid of dust, brake dust, debris, all the crud that builds up there. With certain brands, you also want to, as you're cleaning things, try to lubricate the pistons to the point where it helps them to keep them lubricated, hence the word, but allows the pistons to move in and out of their caliper bores a lot more freely and easily rather than being stuck or, gritty and grimy.
Mm-hmm. At the very least, we should be trying to get in there and just dust things off.
Absolutely. Alcohol, depending on the brand, it used to be alcohol was fine everywhere. Some brands are now recommending just water. I find that a little bit of rubbing alcohol, especially at the higher percentages, I tend to try to get 90 or 94%, really does a great job of cleaning things without doing damage to piston seals and pistons themselves and discoloring calipers.
The other area you touched on was, of course, getting a caliper to squarely sit on its mounts, which can be an issue. I mean, bikes come out of factories; they're not perfect, and specifically where those calipers mount, the post mounts themselves can be a little off, and that's the job of a professional mechanic to square those things up.
That is, and I'll be honest, I don't have the proper tool to do that, so it can become a little tricky. Believe it or not, sometimes you got to fudge things, and you use a little washer to counteract some funkiness in the caliper. Not always recommended because it then changes its overall height position on your rotor. In a perfect world, I would have every tool out there. It's not always cost effective though.
Yeah, it's one of those things that a mechanic uses maybe once, twice a year. And to have that tool sitting around just to shave a little metal off those post mounts can be a
lot of money to not use.
But if you look around, you'll find somebody with it if you're having problems with your calipers not sitting squarely on their mounts. That can be fixed, and it's something that you can have done. Let's get to the other thing here, and that's howling brakes. When we brake and they scream, when they go, "Whee!" or they squeal, or they make all kinds of racket, which of course drives us up the wall. Well, what's going on? What can we do?
Well, at first, it could be, if it's a new system, it could just be that way in a sense of pads, rotors need to sort of mate and bed in to get the factory glaze off the rotor, off the pads. A lot of times with a new system, if there is squealing and howling, it will usually go away within, the first couple heavy duty pulls on the brake lever. If you have a new system and there's no noise, and 2 months, 3 months, 4 months later, holy crap, there's all kinds of noise. What's going on? Usually, at least in my opinion, my experience, it comes down to contamination. And contamination just means brake dust buildup, rotor dust buildup. It's friction. So the pads are wearing, the rotor's wearing. You have, depending on pads you're using, you have the resin or hybrid material or whatever it's actually used, little dust particles, and you have wear and tear from rotors with little pieces of microscopic metal. So again, doing some basic cleaning on calipers, brake pads, rotors periodically can do wonders for that.
Again, that same alcohol can help us clean our rotors, right? Just don't touch them with our bare hands. Use a lint-free cloth of some sort.
Absolutely. And even sanding rotors down, it's harder to find at local stores, but emery cloth is a really wonderful thing to use because it's flexible. It has a cloth backing. It's like sandpaper on cloth. And so a little bit of scouring of brake pads, cleaning that glazed surface off. If you pull brake pads out, you look at a new one as compared to a well-used one, you're going to look at it going, well, that doesn't look right. A little bit of elbow grease and sort of scouring that brake pad in an even, flat sense to get that contamination, that buildup off there, can take care of that issue as well as doing some cleaning on the rotor.
Yeah. Can I use a solvent on those pads as well, or cleanser?
There are some bike-specific cleaners for brake pads and rotors out there. The main brands will typically have a few things to offer, and I've actually used them more recently to find it does make a difference. It helps to clean. It sort of penetrates or evaporates around the brake pad into the brake pad and helps to purge some of the crud out there. What I find is doing a little sanding, then doing the cleaning with the brake cleaner can make a good difference. The other thing I found is the standard pads that come with your brakes are, good, but there are aftermarket pads that can last longer, can decrease brake noise, and sometimes take care of those issues better than the standard pads that come with your brakes.
Whenever you put new pads in, folks, though, make sure you bed them in. I mean, that's the one thing you'll rip right through your pads if you don't get them bedded in properly.
And periodically measure the thickness of your rotor. If you don't have access to a caliper or a micrometer, go somewhere. If you ride consistently, you are wearing and wearing and wearing your rotor. So there sometimes people will try everything. Lo and behold, the culprit is my rotor's too thin. So a rotor that's too thin can't handle the braking forces and will increase vibration because it becomes more flexible.
Which gets me to my next topic here regarding brake noise. That's harmonics.
Yes.
Now, look, when you squeeze brakes, there's vibration going on, and that can create a
Friction,
musical note, for
vibration.
God's sakes.
Absolutely.
Sometimes this is in your frame.
Yep.
Your frame can vibrate.
Yep.
And the key is to, try and find where that vibration
Right.
is, and you might be able to dampen it.
Yep. Your hubs as well. If you have hubs that have a little bit of play side to side, any sort of unstable movement can increase drastically anything wonky that's going on.
I also heard that if you hear the turkey gobble sound coming out when you brake, that was a good turkey gobble, right?
No, that was great.
That could be spoke tension, I was hearing.
It can be spoke tension. It could be spokes rubbing. Again, we're dealing with all kinds of forces and vibration and things. So you get all these weird things conspiring to make all kinds of wonderful noises.
Is it unreasonable to have a no noise expectation out of our disc brakes these days? To me, they have not gotten that far yet. I'm willing to put up with a certain amount of noise.
Sure.
What's your level on this?
I think most of us expect quiet because we don't want to hear anything other than us huffing and puffing up a hill. But in the grand scheme of things, any good mechanic, wheel builder, whomever will let you know perfection does not exist anywhere on a bicycle, let alone yourself. So you have to be willing at some points to put up with some noise. I'm sure your car makes noise. I know mine does, and it's brand new. So, have I gotten used to it? Yeah. Is it great? No. Is the car fine? Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, folks, if you need help with your brakes, Diablo Wheelworks, Ryan Morse is your guy. And again, at Leadville, you're going to need to slow down. You want to go fast, but you're going to have to slow down too. And we want your brakes to work right. And we'll have more with Ryan this season, including a discussion on building custom wheels.
I'm looking forward to it. And now let's go ahead and wrap up season 3, episode 12 of the Leadville podcast, presented, of course, as always, by Floyd's of Leadville. If you like our show, give us a 5-star rating and review over at Apple Podcasts. And please share it with your other cycling friends and support our sponsors. Let them know you appreciate them making this show possible.
We've got 2 more Owning It episodes coming up where pros and you and Fatty and I tell the stories of big mistakes we've made and what we've learned from them.
Yeah, meanwhile, if you have other ideas or questions for us, head on over to Leadville100podcast.com and we've got a comment section there. Just get in touch that way. That's also where you can find a link to our Slack workspace and jump into our never-ending, ongoing forever conversation.
Good luck in your training. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the 2021 starting line.
Rider up, Leadville, 100 miles down. Let's let them hear it. That's right. That is rider 352, Felipe Castro. Way to go.